Everyone says the secret to a long life is eating right, exercising, staying positive. After 100 years, I can tell you that is only half the truth. And the half no one talks about, that is the part that almost destroyed me. I have watched a lot of people grow old. I have watched some of them do it gracefully, and I have watched most of them suffer in ways they never expected and never prepared for. And the suffering I am talking about is not the kind that comes from bad knees or a weak heart. It is the other kind, the kind that sits inside a quiet house on a Tuesday afternoon and has no name and makes no sound, the kind that your doctor cannot find on any test and your children cannot see when they call to check in. That is the suffering that almost took me, and I spent 10 years drowning in it before something changed. I'm Emma, and I'm 100 years old. I've outlived the ones I loved, and even those who were once my enemies. Yet believe me, being the last one standing doesn't feel like a win. It's just a void, a hollow feeling that's much harder to bear than leaving before the rest. That is something they do not put in the pamphlets about getting older, that you will carry your grief like furniture, that you will keep setting a table for someone who is never coming back, and the strangest part is, you will not always want to stop. Now I know what you came here for. You want to know what I eat. You want the list. Fine, I will give it to you. I eat what I like, soup, rice, a little something sweet when I want it. I drink tea in the morning and sometimes something stronger in the evening when my bones are tired and the day felt long. I sleep when I am tired, which at my age happens more than I would prefer to admit. I sit outside in the sun when the weather allows it. I move slowly and deliberately because moving slowly is not laziness. It is respect for a body that has worked very hard for a very long time. That is my diet. That is my routine. But here is what I want you to understand, and I want you to really hear this, because it took me nearly a century to see it clearly. The people I have watched grow old and bitter, the ones who went grey behind the eyes long before they went grey in the hair, they were very, very careful. They avoided this food and feared that activity and measured every risk and read every warning label and worried about everything they put into their bodies. They were disciplined. They were cautious. By every reasonable measure, they were doing everything right. And yet they were the most exhausted people I ever knew, exhausted not in their bodies, exhausted in their spirits. And I have come to believe after all these years that an exhausted spirit does not wait for the body to catch up. It simply decides it has had enough. And then slowly, quietly, without any dramatic announcement, everything else follows. I am not saying eat recklessly. I am not saying ignore your health. I am saying that a person who is deeply alive, who has something to wake up for, who feels connected to something larger than their own pain, that person will outlast the most careful, most disciplined, most medically compliant person in the room every single time. The body follows the spirit. Remember that. Write it down if you need to. Now let me tell you about the hardest years of my life. The hardest moment was not when my husband died. I want to be honest about that, even though it sounds strange to say out loud. When he died, people understood. They came. They sat with me. They brought food I didn't eat and said things that didn't help but meant everything anyway, because at least they were there. At least someone acknowledged that the world had cracked open and something irreplaceable had fallen through. Grief, people understand. Grief has a shape. Grief has rituals. Grief gives you permission to fall apart in front of other people. But loneliness? Loneliness is different. Loneliness is quiet. No one comes for loneliness. There are no rituals for it. There is no casserole dish that someone drops off because they heard you had been sitting alone in your living room for 4 months, staring at a television you are not really watching. Your children have their own lives. And they should. That is how it is supposed to be. That is what you raised them for. But the result is that you sit in a house full of memories and you slowly, gradually realize that the world has moved on completely and no one remembered to tell you where it went. From the age of 70, when my husband passed, to the age of 80, I was not really living. I want you to understand what I mean by that. My heart was beating. I was eating meals and sleeping nights and watching the seasons change outside the window, but I was not living. I was waiting for what I could not have told you. I did not know. I just knew that every day I woke up and looked at the empty chair and thought, what is this all for now? The helplessness was the worst part, not the sadness. I could sit with sadness, the helplessness, the feeling that my life had already told all the stories it had to tell, and now I was just standing around at the end of a party that had finished hours ago, too tired to leave, too lost to find my way home. I stopped gardening. I stopped cooking real meals. I stopped calling people because I did not want to be the person who called just to hear another human voice that felt too desperate, too needy, too much like admitting how far I had fallen. And nobody knocked on my door because nobody knew. That is the cruelest part of that kind of loneliness. It is completely invisible to everyone around you. You look fine, you are managing, you are surviving, and surviving from the outside looks a lot like living, but it is not. It is not even close. I was sitting in my room one afternoon, an ordinary afternoon, the same as every other afternoon, when I heard a knock at the door. I want to be honest with you, I almost did not get up. I sat there for a moment and thought about whether it was worth the effort, and that tells you everything about where I was at that point in my life. A knock at the door, and my first instinct was to ask myself if answering it was worth the trouble. But I got up. Something made me get up. Maybe habit, maybe stubbornness. I have always been stubborn. My husband used to say it was my best quality and my worst one at the same time, depending on the day. I opened the door, and standing on my porch was a woman about my age, around 80, and I want to tell you about her eyes because I still think about them. They were not young eyes. They had lines around them, and they had seen things, and they carried the weight that every pair of 80-year-old eyes carries, whether you want them to or not. But they were alive. I had not seen eyes like that in a long time, not the brightness of someone who has not yet suffered, but the brightness of someone who has suffered completely and come out the other side, carrying something they did not have before. There is a difference, and once you have seen it, you know it immediately. She held out a book. She said, "Read this. Practice these exercises. They cost nothing. You have nothing to lose." And then she smiled, not the polite smile of someone trying to sell you something, but the smile of someone who remembers exactly what the darkness feels like and wants to hand you what pulled them through it. I almost closed the door. I want to be honest about that too. My first instinct was skepticism. My second instinct was pride. I did not want to be the kind of person who opens their door to a stranger and takes a book and believes things. I had been a practical woman my whole life. But then I thought about the chair. I thought about what waiting felt like. I thought about all those identical afternoons stretching out in front of me like a road that leads nowhere. And I thought, anything is better than this, anything at all. So I took the book. I will not pretend the change was instant. It was not. The first few weeks I read slowly, a little skeptically, stopping often to argue with the pages in my head, the way I have always argued with things I did not yet understand. But something kept pulling me back. Not any single idea, the whole of it. The way it spoke about living not as a performance but as a practice. The way it described the principles of truth, compassion, and forbearance, not as rules imposed from outside, but as qualities you uncover inside yourself, like cleaning something that was always there underneath. I started doing the exercises, 5 gentle movements, slow and deliberate, the kind of thing my pride would have dismissed completely 10 years earlier. But I had run out of pride somewhere in those 10 years of waiting, and what was left was just a very tired old woman willing to try something, anything, that felt like it was reaching toward life rather than away from it. And within a few months, something shifted, not dramatically. There was no single morning I woke up and felt like a different person. It was slower than that and more real than that. It was more like the way a room gets lighter as the sun rises. You cannot point to the exact moment, but at some point you look up and realize you can see everything clearly, and you cannot remember the last time you could. My body felt lighter. My mind felt clearer than it had in years. The fog that had settled over the last decade, that thick grey heaviness that I had started to believe was just what being old felt like, began to lift. But the thing that surprised me most was not the physical change. It was the other one. My children started visiting, not out of obligation. I know the difference. I am their mother. I have always been able to read the difference between a visit that comes from love and a visit that comes from guilt. They started coming because they wanted to. They said I had changed. They said I seemed different. Peaceful, they said. Present, like I was actually in the room with them instead of somewhere else behind my eyes. My grandchildren started asking me questions, real questions, not the polite kind you ask an old person to make them feel included. They wanted to know what I thought about things. They wanted to know what I had learned. One of my granddaughters called me one evening, not on a holiday, not for any occasion, just to talk. She said, "Grandma, how do you stay so calm about everything?" I had gone from being a burden to being a source at 80 years old, after 10 years of being certain that my story was finished. I think about those 10 years a lot, not with regret. Regret is too heavy to carry at my age, and I have learned to put it down. But I think about them with a kind of tenderness, because I was doing the best I could with what I had. I was surviving, and for a long time surviving was all I had the energy to do. What I did not know, what nobody told me, was that the way back was not going to look the way I expected. I thought healing would come from inside myself, from deciding to feel better, from willpower, from the kind of determination that had gotten me through hard things before. But I had used up that kind of determination. I did not have any left. What actually saved me was a knock at a door. One person who showed up, one woman with alive eyes who had been where I was and found her way through and came back to pass it on. I have thought about that a great deal, about what it means, about what she did for me, not just by handing me a book, but by showing up, by existing in front of me as proof that what I was experiencing was not permanent, that it was possible to come through the other side of loss and emptiness and still have something, still be something. That is why I walk now. Every day that I can, I walk through town, not for exercise, though I suppose that is a side effect. I walk because somewhere out there is someone sitting in a room feeling the way I felt, someone who has stopped gardening and stopped cooking real meals and stopped calling people because they do not want to seem desperate, someone who has started asking whether answering the door is worth the effort. And maybe I will knock on the right door. Maybe I will be someone's proof that the other side exists. You do not need to be young to matter. You do not need to be loud or accomplished or remarkable in any way the world would recognize. Sometimes what another person needs is simply to open their door and find someone with alive eyes standing there, holding something worth reading. Sometimes all it takes is a knock. I want to be honest with you before I finish, because I have lived too long to waste your time with anything less than honesty. I will not tell you that Falun Dafa will cure every illness or erase every sorrow. I am not a doctor. I am not making promises I cannot keep. I am a 100-year-old woman who spent 10 years drowning in the quietest, most invisible kind of suffering, and then found something that helped her breathe again. And I am telling you about it because somebody once told me, and it changed everything. The practice is simple. The exercises are gentle. The book, Juan Falun, you can read online for free. There are no fees. There are no requirements. There is only the practice itself and what you make of it and what it makes of you. What I can tell you from 100 years of paying attention is this: the body follows the spirit. When the spirit is lost, when it has no ground to stand on, no meaning to reach toward, no reason to stay curious about what tomorrow might bring, the body receives that message and begins slowly to agree. And when the spirit finds something solid beneath its feet, even something small, even something borrowed from a stranger who knocked at your door on an ordinary afternoon, the body receives that message too. The principles that Falun Dafa is built on, truth, compassion, forbearance, are not complicated. They are not esoteric. They are just an invitation to live more honestly, more gently, and with more patience for yourself and everyone around you than you have probably been managing. And when you start to actually practice that, even imperfectly, even on the hard days when nothing in you wants to, something changes, something small and quiet and real. Whether you try it is entirely your decision. I am not here to convince you of anything. I am here because a woman once stood at my door and gave me back the ability to get up in the morning with a reason to open it. Please, whatever that door is for you, do not keep waiting in the room. Something is always worth getting up for, even now, even at this hour of your life, especially at this hour of your life when the days are quieter and the chair across from you is empty and you have started to wonder if the story is almost finished. It is not finished. I promise you, it is not finished. I am 100 years old, and the last 20 years have been the most alive I have ever felt. Go find your knock at the door. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Aesop kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Mark Twain. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for a kindness. Lucius Annaeus Seneca. A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees. Amelia Earhart. Unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least costly, and most underrated agent of human change. Bob Kerrey. You cannot do a kindness too soon, for you never know how soon it will be too late. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Kindness is in our power, even when fondness is not. Samuel Johnson. Constant kindness can accomplish much. As the sun makes ice melt, kindness causes misunderstanding, mistrust, and hostility to evaporate. Albert Schweitzer. My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. Dalai Lama. Remember, there's no such thing as a small act of kindness. Every act creates a ripple with no logical end. Scott Adams. Kindness begins with the understanding that we all struggle. Charles Glassman. Human kindness has never weakened the stamina or softened the fiber of a free people. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you. Princess Diana. Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. Mother Teresa. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a harder battle. Plato. There are 3 ways to ultimate success. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. The third way is to be kind. Mr. Rogers. Kindness makes a fellow feel good, whether it's being done to him or by him. Frank A. Clark. A part of kindness consists in loving people more than they deserve. Joseph Joubert.